Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jesse Torres, your state small business advocate here at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So our webinar today is connecting your small business to the global marketplace. The webinar is being hosted by the Office of Small Business Advocate, a unit within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GO-Biz. We're excited to have some great presenters here with us today to talk about international trade. I'm sure as many of you know, the state of California is a primary hub for the entire country when it comes to exports and imports. And by being here, having a business here in the state, you're definitely have opportunities to really leverage that, and our presenters will touch upon some of those opportunities and how you might be able to plug in to expand your market globally. Today we have with us Brian Peck, who's the Deputy Director of International Affairs and Business Development here at GO-Biz. He'll be presenting with his colleague Diana Dominguez, who is the Special Advisor for International Trade. Both Brian and Diana are responsible for promoting California exports of goods and services in the global marketplace. Also presenting our members from the District Export Council of Southern California. It's great to have Mrs. Suzanne K. Ross, the immediate past chair, and also Mr. David J. Habib, who's the Vice Chair of the Central Coast. The District Export Council is comprised of international trade industry experts who serve as consultants to provide export assistance to small and medium-sized businesses. Before I turn this webinar over to them to get started, we're going to have Janelle Green as part of our team here. She's the small business specialist for GO-Biz, who will introduce to you some of the features of the GoToWebinar, the platform we're using today.
Thank you, Jesse. At the far right of your screen, you should see a vertical toolbar. This toolbar will provide you with access to audio and visual for the presentation. If you experience any technical audio issues during the presentation, please click on Help at the top of the toolbar and then select Sound Check. This will allow you to check your audio configuration. Participant lines will remain muted during the entire presentation. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit it during the presentation via the Questions chat box. The Questions chat box is located in the middle of the toolbar. GO-Biz staff will monitor the Questions chat box and respond during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. At the top left of the toolbar, you will see two icons. The blue icon with a white box allows you to view the presentation in full screen mode. The blue icon with a picture of a hand allows you to raise your hand to ask questions during the webinar. Please note that this feature will not be used since questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar via the Questions chat box. I'll now turn over the presentation to Brian Peck. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Janelle, and hello everyone. I'm Brian Peck, the Deputy Director for International Affairs and Business Development at GO-Biz. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon. During the course of this webinar, we will be providing information on the basics for exporting and the services and programs that GO-Biz provides, including the STEP, or the State Trade Export Promotion Grant Program, to help small and medium-sized businesses enter into or expand sales in the global marketplace through exporting. To start off, we are very pleased to have with us Ms. Sue Ross and Mr. David Habib from the District Export Council to share their expertise in exporting. They will be providing info on the key issues and requirements that you should be aware of, especially if you are new to or considering entering into the export markets. And so with that, Sue, if you'd like to hand it over to you, and Janelle, if you could, next slide, please.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon to everyone. Jesse did a terrific job explaining a little bit about the District Export Council. We are, in fact, in the Los Angeles area, or sorry, in the Southern California area. There are 35 of us appointed by the Secretary of Commerce. And one of our primary goals is to support the Department of Commerce and other partners such as GO-Biz in assisting exporters new to market or otherwise to expand their horizons. Janelle, if you could go through the next couple of slides till we get to next. Yeah, stop there if you would. So first of all, back one please. Our colleague Vince Iapella was originally going to be available to present today. He's unfortunately under the weather, so he sends his apologies. Because we have limited time, what you see on this slide is really the key message, and that is all we phrase here is know before you go, to really do your homework and understand what you're getting into. And so with that, I'm going to hand this off to my colleague David Habib and ask David if he would cover the next few topics, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for attending this this webinar. We're going to giving you an overview from maybe 30,000 feet of the major issues we think you ought to think about, and we certainly encourage you to export your products. There's more assistance available today than there ever has been at little or no cost. So just running through these bullet items on here, what is your plan? You should have a plan. A lot of companies don't have one, they just react, but you're much better off if you have a plan. Regarding production, there are a number of issues that you probably want to think about if you're producing or selling a product. You obviously want to know your product and how it fits into the market. You want to know that your product is desired in the market, and whether there are any standards or issues that you need to address in order to ensure that your product is well received in the market. Regarding sales, everybody likes sales. It's a good idea to have your salespeople connected to your production people and your finance people so that you have a seamless transaction. When you're negotiating sales, one of the things that I find we need to pay more attention to is delivery promises and delivery commitments. Customers take these things pretty seriously, and when you're talking about delivering across the planet, there are a number of issues that can arise. You just want to make sure that your promises are reasonable in that regard. Some customers actually provide penalties for late deliveries. You certainly don't want to take that lightly. Payment and delivery terms need to be negotiated in your sales transactions just like you would in a domestic transaction. You want to know that you're going to get paid. You want to understand what the delivery constraints are that you'll face and what the risks are, because you have domestic risks, you have risks when the product is in transit, any risks at the other end in the destination country. So you want to be realistic in assessing those risks and determining who's going to assume those risks, the buyer or the seller. There's something called Incoterms, which are a terrific tool. It's an acronym for International Contract Terms. They're really delivery terms that are widely accepted around the globe for purposes of allocating risks connected with delivery. A lot of information on the internet about Incoterms. Strongly suggest that you take advantage of that and learn about them. Marketing is somewhat connected to sales, and we go out and we're promoting our products in other countries. You need to be aware of constraints in your particular market. There are some unusual places, obviously, or some places that have unusual restrictions on marketing, and those restrictions might be related to sexual innuendo of some kind, or anything displaying women in a titillating light, or anything like that, or anything involving alcohol, or anything suggesting religious or political issues. So you always want to be conscious of that and understand that you're doing business somewhere other than in the United States, where virtually anything goes. Trademarks and copyrights are obviously extremely important. Intellectual property is very valuable. We all value intellectual property, and the protection of it is really important. One of the things to remember about exporting is that not every place in the world agrees with the United States, for example, in what should be protected as intellectual property, how it should be protected, for how long it should be protected, etc. You want to be very careful with that. Make sure the people you're doing business with, it's very clear that the intellectual property is yours and that you take steps to protect it. In the regulatory scheme of things, there are a variety of regulations that affect products and services that are exported. Certainly in this country we have the Export Administration Regulations. These are export control regulations. A lot of people don't understand that all exports are controlled by Export Administration Regulations and other regulations. Just because they're controlled, however, doesn't mean that you have to climb Mount Everest in order to get approval to export. In fact, the opposite is the case for probably 95% of products exported. There's really not an issue in terms of licensing. But for the other 5%, there is an issue. And the regulatory issues, the export control issues, have to do with the product and the destination and the customer. So again, there's a lot of information out there about that. Our District Export Council and other organizations put on free or close to free seminars on this, which I encourage you to seek out and attend. Also, there are in-country regulations that affect your products, meaning the destination country may have regulations. And they probably do, particularly if it's a product, for example, that's going to be ingested into the body or put on the body. There will be labeling requirements and content disclosure requirements, language requirements, packaging requirements, etc. It's important that you be aware of all this so that you're properly prepared to be confident in your transaction. And again, there is so much information out there available on these subjects. Really encourage you to locate it and learn about it. Again, the cost is much lower or free than it's ever been in the past, in my experience. Logistics is a huge deal. Obviously, in a domestic transaction, you have logistical issues, truck, rail, etc. You have the same issues in an international transaction, although you have to add to it the international aspect of it. When goods are in transit, either by air or by sea, there are logistical issues, and there are constraints and risks that you have to deal with. Depending on the delivery terms that you agree to with your customer, there are logistical issues on the other end as well. For example, if you agree to deliver your product literally to the store, you have to deal with the logistic issues in a distant country. So it becomes, again, to understand what these risks are. And I think the Incoterms, which are very, very clear on this. Insurance is not raised. Again, it's difficult to handle. The gross matter of who's going to handle it, who's going to handle it. The costs can vary depending on who you're dealing with, the volume of transactions. Nevertheless, it's an important issue to accompany that experience export-related insurance and covering that are in transit. Payment is sort of self-explanatory. We all want to get paid, and there are a variety of payment terms that we can agree with. Cash transfers, on delivery. These are two opposite extremes. One favors the buyer, one favors the seller. Normally, you're going to come up with some kind of a term that's in between. You want to be competitive in the payment terms you offer your customers. A lot of your competition will be very that are producing a product that's competitive to yours. So you do want to know who your competition is. It's not just pricing. A lot of times delivery has a lot to do with it, and you may be able to take advantage in that regard. But you obviously need to know who your competition is. Where do you need the help? Listen, this is something that we all need to be honest about. We all think we can do anything and everything, and we really can't. I'm an attorney. I ran a business for a while, and when I ran a business, I hired a lot of lawyers because I realized I didn't know what I was doing in certain respects. You need to be honest about this. Again, there are so many resources out there now, especially compared to a couple of decades ago. It's really terrific for the new exporter. Culture. Culture is huge. Obviously, there are different languages. There are different histories. People view certain terms differently. Something that might be acceptable in terms of conversation or in terms of a noun or a verb in this country may be insulting somewhere else, so you need to be familiar with that. Personal connections and relationships are tremendously important in international trade transactions. We here in this country have a very predictable system of redress and commercial rules that everybody follows, and if they don't follow them, we have a very predictable mechanism for to obtain relief or a remedy. That's not always the case in other countries, and other countries put a premium on personal relationships, so you need to be aware of that. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is mentioned here. We do have an anti-corruption statute here in this country. The government is unforgiving about corruption and bribery, so for most of us that's not an issue. but for some of us it is. And in some countries, payments are ubiquitous. The expectation of payments is rampant, and so you have to be careful about that. Again, there's information out there on how to avoid that and how to protect yourself and be proactive. Getting paid, terms of sale. Different mechanisms to get paid. Again, I mentioned cash in advance and payment on delivery are two opposites. There are documentary collections where an international sale is really governed by the documents involved. A bill of lading, a commercial invoice, certificates of origin that state the origin of the goods and what have you. You can use these documents in connection with securing a payment for those goods, either through a letter of credit, something called a letter of credit, where a bank is substituted as the obligor to pay you rather than your customer. Your customer goes to their bank and tells their bank to pay you subject to receipt of certain documents. There's also something called a documentary collection, which is a little less complicated than a letter of credit. It's also a little less secure, but it also involves the exchange of documents and the use of banks to accommodate payments. A lot of information out there. I encourage you to look into it. Insurance is mentioned again here. You need delivery insurance, you need payment insurance, you may need political risk insurance. All of those insurances are out there. There are companies that will vet your customer to determine what your credit risk is and rate them accordingly and give you a quote for payment risk insurance. The rates vary depending on who you're dealing with, but insurance is something that you really need to look into. Regulatory and legal challenges can involve a variety of things, whether on this side of the world or the other side of the world. Again, we do have export controls here. There are destination countries have controls on what is licensable, what hoops need to be jumped through in order to get a product licensed, and these can affect everything from a simple sale of goods to a franchise. So you need to look into that as well. Last item on here is online sales. This is something that, in my experience, people tend to be rather careless about. It's so convenient to effect an online sale. You need to do something that sets forth the terms on which the sale is made. Either use a click wrap agreement of some kind or something that evidences the parties' agreement on the terms of sale. This is just a real quick overview, as you can tell. We're happy to answer questions at the end. And again, I encourage you to seek out providers of training on all these subjects. Up and down the state, Fresno has programs, Sacramento has programs, Southern California certainly has programs. So thanks for that, and I'll turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, David. And if I could get the next slide, please. So hopefully part of the message that has been that we've shared with you is there's really sort of three parts to this. One is your own internal operation. The second one is vetting your business partners. And the third key to success is having the right service providers. In the U.S., that typically involves having the freight forwarder that assists you with the export. Finding freight forwarders is kind of like finding doctors and lawyers. Talk to your friends, talk to your competitors, vet them. Don't just take the first one that comes to you. Don't assume because they're large they know what they're doing, or that because they're small they're a better service provider. It really comes down to what are your needs and what are your expectations. You see customs brokers there. David alluded to the situation where you sell the goods to a customer where you agree to deliver them. So at that point, you're the primary party both at the exporting end and at the receiving end. Most freight forwarders have relationships with their counterparts in other parts of the world. You want to find that out going in. You want to know what the capabilities are of that freight forwarder. You want to find out if they're a member of any association, generally what their credentials are and what their experience is. Terms of sale are here yet again, as is insurance, because these are in particular two areas that are critical in your relationship with your freight forwarder. You should, as a matter of course, be giving written instructions to your freight forwarder. You should, as a matter of course, be required by your freight forwarder to provide them with a power of attorney. You see a reference a couple of bullet points down about the automated export system. the U.S. is moving to a platform where both all imports and all exports are being reported through this system. The forwarder needs a power of attorney in order to be able to file for you. Your forwarder is kind of a last line of defense in a lot of different ways. David talked about the export restrictions that we have, whether it's a license or it's an economic sanction. There's a lot of interest right now, obviously, in Cuba and Iran, and the differences in those rules and what has happened in the last few months is quite different. But it is the forwarder who's going to be able to look at this and say to you, or should be able to say to you, look, you are saying you are selling these goods FOB Los Angeles, but the freight is moving prepaid. That's a mismatch. You also want to talk to the forwarder about insurance, and one of the critical reasons for doing that is you really don't want to have a problem with cargo damage. And if you do, you don't want to be at the mercy of the carrier, who has a very strict limit of liability. There are some international rules that allow both vessel operators and airlines, and to a lesser extent rail and truck, to limit their liability. In the case of air, it's $20 a pound, sorry, $20 a kilo. In the case of ocean, it's $500 a package. If you shipped goods of any value, that's not going to come anywhere near to cover for you what that loss might be. So having the right kind of insurance in the right amounts is critical. You see next as a bullet point advanced manifest rules. Many of the countries in the world, led by the U.S., now require advanced manifest reporting, meaning that the contents of the shipment is reported to, in this case, the U.S. export authorities, a period of time, typically 24 hours per vessel, prior to export. You need to build that into the process. You need to know when it is you need to get your goods delivered so that the documents are in order and so that this can be done. One thing we didn't include here that we should have is there's something coming on the books as of July 1 called SOLAS. This is a requirement that every exporter now will have to verify and validate the weight of his shipment. And you can quickly imagine how cumbersome that might become, and is actually something that there's a lot of upset about, because there's not a lot of details yet available on exactly how it's going to be implemented and what's going to happen if a shipment gets delivered without the appropriate certification with it, and what's going to happen to the related charges. A couple of other things you want to ask your forwarder about have to do with their shipment tracking capability. The more modern ones, if you will, or the more sophisticated ones, actually will give you access to the platform to information about where your shipment is at. You want to know if they can do that. You want to know if that forwarder is a member of any supply chain security program. That again helps with your shipment move quickly. In the days when I started, and I actually started in something other than a lawyer, your entire concept of supply chain security was going to get the box there intact. That's obviously changed now. The U.S. has a program called the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, otherwise known as CTPAT. The rest of the world has something called AEO, the Authorized Economic Operator. Not only do you want to know where your freight forwarder is in one of those programs, you also want to know where your buyer is, because one of the benefits of this type of program is to expedite the release of the goods. I know we're quickly going to run out of time to do the rest of our portion, so Janelle, if I could have the next slide, please. So David has said a couple of times, and quite correctly so, there are a number of resources available. This is by no means a complete list, but every one of these resources will provide you with information free of charge. And if I could get the next slide, please. As we said, we are members of the District Export Council of Southern California. You can get a lot of information about the resources we provide at the link on the left. The link on the right is to the National District Export Council. There are some 59, I believe it is, District Export Council throughout the country. So depending on where you're located and depending on where you want to export your shipment, there are plenty of resources just through the deck. And then I think that's the last slide. Could we get the next one, please? There's the final message. It really is all about due diligence and relationships. You need to pick the right business partners. You need to do your homework. There are going to be things that are going to go wrong. You want to be prepared to deal with them, and obviously that can only happen through insurance and through preparation and through having the right business partner. So with that, Brian, we're going to hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sue. And Janelle, if you could take the next slide, please. So thank you both, Sue and David, for very useful and informative information. As they both mentioned, there's a lot of resources out there, including ourselves, GO-Biz. For those of you who may not be familiar with GO-Biz, it was an agency created by Governor Brown back in the fall of 2012 to basically become a one-stop shop for companies and businesses in California, including small and medium-sized businesses. As this slide points out, there's a variety of services that our office provides to the various units, including the Small Business Unit and our unit, the International Trade, International Affairs Unit and Business Development. Janelle, the next slide, please. So our International Affairs and Business Development Unit basically has two simple but straightforward missions, if you will, mandates. One is to help California companies export, and the other is to help attract foreign direct investment into the state, which can help small companies grow into bigger companies. Obviously, today we're focusing on the export side, and our key, I think, role here is to be one of a facilitator and an enabler for small and medium-sized companies, especially those new to market in terms of exporting, to locate and or to obtain access to the various resources that are available to help you get into the export market. Janelle, the next one, please. So as you've heard from Sue and David and ourselves, there are plenty of resources out there. We work very closely with our international, our federal, regional, and local partners, and again, serving as a facilitator, depending on what your needs are, depending on what type of resources that you might be necessary to either learn how to export or begin exporting or expanding exports, we can put you in touch with the right party or parties that can help you assist you in that endeavor. For example, the Department of Commerce has what's called a Gold Key program, and that basically for a fee around $700, $800 would, through that service, the Department of Commerce will identify potential business partners or distributors in a particular market or country and set those meetings up for you, so that when you go to there, you can help actually get a head start with companies, distributors that could be specifically targeted to be a good match for you in terms of distributors or joint venture partners in terms of exporting your products in that particular market. As the earlier presentation pointed out, it's very important that you get the right business partner in the export market. We also administer the State Trade and Export Promotion Grant Program, or STEP program. My partner, colleague Diana will give me a little more detail on that, but basically this is a federally funded program that provides grants of up to $2,500 per year to small and medium-sized businesses to engage in trade and export promotion, whether it's participating in a trade mission, a trade show, or other type of program or initiative that you might embark on in terms of promoting or creating an export market for your particular products. The state of California has several trade and investment MOUs, including with China, Mexico, Japan, Israel, and Peru. Our office is responsible for implementing those MOUs. We do that through providing and help facilitating trade missions to those countries, exchange of information and trade and investment opportunities with those countries, helping to provide contacts for particular markets. All of these MOUs are available on our website at GO-Biz under the International Unit. I invite you to take a look at them, and if you are interested in those particular countries, again, these trade and investment MOUs provide a platform or framework to help facilitate the growth of trade and exports for California companies with these trading partners. The state of California also has a trade office located in Shanghai. It is cooperated with our business partner, the Bay Area Council, that has an office and facilitates staffing there. Again, it helps provide information and expertise in exporting or helping to facilitate the right resources to locate in helping you to export to the China market. We also are responsible for trade missions, and there are several types of trade missions. Obviously, the ones that are led by the governor. He has led missions to China and Mexico, which provide a great opportunity, again, for especially small, medium-sized businesses to participate in that. Having the governor involved opens up a lot of doors, and we've had very successful results from those trade missions. In addition, we also have several trade missions led by our agency, the GO-Biz. We've had 4 to China over the past 2 years, a couple to Mexico, and we are looking at expanding that to other markets in the coming year. We work with other agencies in the state, for example, the California Energy Commission, focusing on renewable energy, clean tech, energy storage, especially for startups, and have led some trade missions there. And then, of course, as Diana will explain a little bit later, there are several trade mission or trade show exhibition internationally taking place that are available through our STEP partner programs. All right, and Janelle, next slide. And with that, we'd like to turn over to Diana to take a little more, provide a little more detail on our STEP program. Diana.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, everybody. So we do, as Brian mentioned, we do have a state trade export expansion program. As Brian mentioned in the previous slide, it was formerly known as State Trade and Export Program, but the SBA has since rebranded to the California State Trade Expansion Program. So if you hear either of the two names, they're often referred to as California STEP or the STEP program. It's still the same thing. So next slide, please. So the STEP program is pretty simple. It's designed to drive exports for California small businesses. So if you're already exporting, we'd like to help you export more. If you're not exporting, then we'd like to help you get started. Next slide, please. So the California small business by way of means, one-on-one consultation, work our STEP trade partners. The program is designed to put you directly in front of potential buyers, international buyers, by way of business lifestyle products. So participation in these activities will allow you to interface directly with potential buyers. So from that list and the industries I mentioned, if you didn't see any of those trade activities, if you felt that none of them covered your industry, there's still an opportunity to create a promotion activity. And Brian mentioned it earlier in a way of our you can apply for $2,500 in reimbursement. So next slide, please. So the name of that grant program, we were an individual company export promotion activity, and it's designed to provide direct California businesses to form a reimbursement. So if you see the activities and you want to a different trade show, this ICEP, as we refer to it, can support those activities. So you want to participate in a sales trip by way of subscribing to U.S. Department of Commerce services. This program can help. If you're needing to train marketing materials, your website, this can help marketing costs. And then any other export promotion expense that you might have, if you're sure.
Hopefully we provided for you at least a brief nutshell of the various services that GO can provide in helping you enter into the export market or expand your exports and find new opportunities. You know, a fact that's often stated, but I think it's important to reiterate, is that 95% of the world's consumers and 80% of the global purchasing power lie outside the United States. So if you want to see growth for your company, international trade is a tremendous opportunity to do so. We encourage you to contact us. As you saw both through our presentation and the presentation from our friends at the deck, there are a lot of resources out there, and part of it is trying to find the right resource to help you. And so that's what we're here for, and again, appreciate the support of our partners at the deck. And with that, let's turn over to Janelle, our moderator, for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, this will now begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. The first question, how can my firm maximize our marketing efforts through trade shows abroad?
I'll take that one if that's okay.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, sure. So, you know, through trade shows, I mean, you know, obviously a lot of business is being greater facilitating internet sales and stuff like that. But I think that all of you who are in business and, you know, trying to sell your products know that in the end, the ultimate sales pitch or the ultimate sales closer, if you will, is our face meetings. And so, you know, the ability to go to the exact markets interested in exporting, getting to know who the customers are, want, getting to meet actual companies that you can be a partner or your distributor or your purchaser to these. We've had countless success stories from companies that had difficulties entering into markets before, you know, or without participating in the show, and after participating in the show, deals come to place. So I think it really comes down to very simple but very, you know, very basic tenet of doing business, and that's, you know, opportunity to pitch your product, to pitch your service. And so trade shows provides a platform through organizations, you know, the Department of Commerce, through GO-Biz at the state level, through other, there are a number of trade shows that are organized around the world. One most recently was in Hanover, Germany, where again we've some great, getting your feet on the ground and into the market. It's a great opportunity that's facilitated through these organized trade shows.
I totally agree with Brian. I think the logistic pieces to this as well working in mind, and it's not the obvious to, you know, how many people do I take and when do I bring with you, and what would conditions be. And so, for example, and you want to take your booth with you. What happens if that booth ends up not getting loaded on the flight you're on, or gets damaged in the process or whatever? So things like, you know, what do I bring with me? Should it be hand carried? How far in advance should things be shipped? I mean, those are all factors that have to enter into it. And then I think what you have to think about is, who am I going to, and is it worth having an interpreter there? because sometimes the effort of doing that and also learning a few words of local language can be quite helpful. David, any additional thoughts you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd like to underscore what both of you said. That last comment that you made, I think, is actually much more important than someone might think. Just the effort being made to attempt to communicate in a language, in a market where they're using a different language, I think communicates a real seriousness on your part, as does the fact that you will show up in person. I think that just demonstrates a real serious interest that can't be demonstrated electronically. So attendance at these shows, I think you have to be selective because of the cost involved and all that, but I think that the rewards are there.
Thank you both. And one final point when it comes to cost, again, keep in mind that there are resources available in terms of grants and financing, and of course, obviously, one of them is the STEP program to be able to cover some of the cost in participating in a particular trade show.
Thank you. Another question, what are some of the issues or questions you run into on a regular basis with your exporter clients?
Why don't I start with that one?
Yeah, Sue, why don't you?
Okay, so a lot of it, by the time it gets to me, and I'm also, as is David, a lawyer, it's usually the shipment, the situation has gone wrong, what do I do to fix it? And so that's a large part of the reason why we spend a lot of time in the limited amount we had talking about doing your homework. So it comes down to, for example, something as mundane as I bought product that had somebody else's brand on it, and U.S. Customs stopped it on the way out because I can't prove it's legitimate. To, they think it's counterfeit and I can't counter that. To, I can't get paid, what do I do? To the thing that is the biggest headache usually, which is the cargo arrives at the other end and my buyer reneged, what do I do next, and what are the complications out of that? Or it arrived significantly damaged and I didn't sell it on a letter of credit, and I have no insurance for payment, now what do I do? And I think we could spend the next 2 hours talking about any one of those. But I think the point is that that's really why we covered things as we did with terms of sale. You know, when is your responsibility end? When does the buyer's pick up? Having the right insurance, understanding what's going on during the process, and to say that nasty phrase again, doing all the right homework up in advance.
Thank you. We've received a number of questions. Apparently, during the presentation, there's an issue with our Wi-Fi connection, so some of the slides didn't appear when we proceeded from one to the next. So we are going to be posting all these slides, all the slides from this presentation and the 2 other webinars that we're having this month. They'll all be posted to the website. Once they are all registrants will be notified by and our slides will also include video. Moving on to another question, what do you believe are the important things a company can do about risks with respect to export sales?
Well, I guess I'll jump in on this. One of the most important things you can do is to know your customer and know your market. You know, I'm a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, I've written hundreds of contracts, and first I'm a great writer, and I wrote great contracts. Not a thing that substitutes for good relationship. So I think that's very, very important, because the problem comes up in a relationship. The other thing is, in sort of different ways, get information, confident advice, confident direction. There's so much of it out there that it's really inexcusable if you don't know yourself, at least the basics, all over the place. And the only other thing I would say is, do you have to keep confident with the terms of your bids. It's really easy to respond to shipping product, what have you. Problem arises, you're somebody to be looking what the business, or you're going to have somebody like me try to term. So,
David, we just lost you. Just lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, the last thing would come to somebody like me and wherever you
Oh, okay.
yeah, what was the last part of what you said?
Well, you can end up coming to somebody like me to
Prove to me that these goods qualify. And now you got a problem at both ends, both with their customs authorities and a commercial issue with your buyer. So again, doing the homework, understanding what's involved becomes critical. And we should mention made in USA has different meanings in different contexts. And so coming to the conclusion that it's an American product may or may not be the right conclusion, not that can ensue.
Thank you. Another question, what is GO-Biz's role in the Bio International Convention in San Francisco on June 6th to the 9th? Brian, do you have information on that?
Yes, you do. So yes, GO-Biz is involved very much. There is a California pavilion at the Bio conference in San Francisco that takes place, as you said, in the early, week of June 6th, I believe. So we will be there. We'll be facilitating, helping California biotech companies, startups, and small, medium-sized businesses, facilitating meetings. We'll be inviting foreign delegations that are looking to partner up with California biotech companies and facilitating opportunities to meet with those visiting foreign delegations. So we'll be there. You just look for the California Pavilion during the Bio Expo.
Thank you. Who can I contact to shorten my time for export assistance?
Well, I think
depends on where you're.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, it depends on which market or which country you want to export to. And again, the starting points, you can start with GO-Biz, you can start with the U.S. Export Assistance Centers, of course, with our Department of Commerce, with your professional service provider. There are various points of contact. Again, it kind of depends on your product and on the market that you want to export to. Sorry, Sue.
And it can also, no, you're saying exactly what I was going to say. I was just going to add, it can also depend on the nature of the goods. And I mean more than just product. There are certain goods that require licenses to get out of the U.S. and certain goods that require licenses to get into the country and do what you're selling. And so if you don't have those regulatory pieces lined up correctly, you can find yourself in the middle of a mess. So that's one of those questions where, as lawyers, we say that depends on the fact.
Let me underscore what Brian said, though. The resources are there for you. If the U.S. Export Assistance Centers, the personnel that populate these centers are fantastic, and they can tell you in kind of no time what kind of assistance you need and direct you to people that can give it to you. So I always encourage people to contact the U.S. Export Assistance Centers.
And then, if I may add to that, this is Diana. I know that there are tons of resources out there that can support us. I think the largest problem, if you will, that new to exporters run into, we at point are happy to facilitate appropriate to the partner. We're going to help guide you sources. The largest part is knowing questions to ask and where to go. So how to direct any questions and require.
Can I do anything?
I was going to say that one of the great things is that this state president, the national economic priority to increase and this kind of wake-up call there's a number of organizations, programs help all medium-sized owners or resources now in their
one of my is today island. There are also
Another question: what opportunities from my firm can I go over these?
IT.org/California STEP for a listing of those activities.
Which, as you pointed out, Dan, which includes specific trade shows in different markets, so very from the world, as Diana pointed out.
There are some additional questions that we're going to send specific replies offline to some individuals because they're regarding really specific, kind of business-specific issues. So we'll be sending those responses to after our webinar.
You know, at this point, we're here on time when it comes to the webinar, so we're going to conclude the webinar. I just want to thank Brian, Diana, Sue and David with the District Export Council of Southern California for being here with us today and presenting this great information. And thank you to all of our participants who were able to join the webinar this afternoon. As Janelle mentioned, the slides and audio of the presentation will be posted to the GO-Biz website, and we will notify all the registrants by email once they are posted. But appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us for our next webinar, which will be on Thursday, May 19th. It will be the last webinar of our May webinar series, talking about the iBank Small Business Loan Guarantee Program. To register, please visit the GO-Biz homepage at business.ca.gov. But again, thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.